which is how politics is reported. There is now again a debate about why Parliament is not considered more important. And as ever, the government is held to blame. But actually, we haven't altered any of the lines of accountability between Parliament and the executive. What has changed is the way Parliament is reported or not reported. Tell me how many maiden speeches are listened to, how many excellent second reading speeches or committee speeches are covered. Except when they generate controversy, they aren't. If you're a backbench MP today, you learn to give a good press release first and a good parliamentary speech second. But my case, however, is not, isn't this terrible, let's all go back to the old days, is that there's no point in either blaming the media or indeed ourselves. We are both handling the changing nature of communication and the way it works today. And the sooner we recognize this, that it is about a changing context, the better, because we can then debate a sensible way forward. The reality is that as a result of the changing context in which 21st century communications operate, the media are facing a hugely more intense form of competition than anything they have ever experienced before. They are not actually the masters of this change. They are, in many ways, the victims. The result, however, is a media that increasingly, and to a dangerous degree, is driven by impact. Impact is what matters. It is all that can distinguish, can rise above the clamour, can get noticed. Impact gives competitive edge. Of course, the accuracy of a story counts, but it is secondary, often, to impact. It is this necessary devotion to impact that is unravelling standards, driving them down, making the diversity of the media not the strength it should be, but an impulsion towards sensation above all else. Broadsheets today face the same pressures as tabloids. Broadcasters increasingly the same pressure as broadsheets. The audience needs to be arrested, held, and their emotions engaged. Something that is interesting is less powerful than something that makes you angry or shocked. And the consequences of this are acute. First, scandal or controversy beats ordinary reporting hands down. News is rarely news unless it generates heat as much as or more than light. Second, attacking motive is far more potent than attacking judgment. It is not enough for someone to make an error. It has to be venal, conspiratorial. Watergate was a great piece of journalism, but there's a PhD thesis all on its own to examine the consequences for journalism of standing one conspiracy up. What creates cynicism is not mistakes. It is allegations of misconduct. But misconduct is what has impact. Third, the fear of missing out means that today's media, more than ever before, hunts in a pack. In these modes, it's like a feral beast, just tearing people and reputations to bits. But no one dares miss out. Fourth, rather than just report news, even if sensational or controversial, the new technique is commentary on the news being as, if not more important than the news itself. So, for example, there will often be as much interpretation of what a politician is saying as there is coverage of them actually saying it. And in the interpretation, what matters is not what they mean, but what they could be taken to mean. This leads to the incredibly frustrating pastime of expending a large amount of energy rebutting claims about the significance of things said that bears little or no relation to what was intended. But in turn, this leads to a fifth point, which is the confusion of news and commentary. Comment is a perfectly respectable part of journalism, but it's supposed to be separate. Opinion and fact should be clearly divisible. The truth is, a large part of the media today not merely elides the two, but does so now as a matter of course. In other words, this is not exceptional, it is routine. The metaphor for this genre of modern journalism is, if they don't mind me saying so, the independent newspaper. Let me state at the outset that the Independent is a well-edited, lively paper and absolutely entitled to print what it wants, how it wants, on the Middle East or anything else. But it was started as an antidote to the idea of journalism as views, not news. That's why it was called The Independent, if you remember. Today it is avowedly a views paper, not merely a newspaper. And the final consequence of all of this is that it is rare today to find balance in the media. Things, people, issues, stories are all black and white. Life's usual grey is almost entirely absent. Some good, some bad, some things going right, some going wrong. These are concepts alien to much of today's reporting. It's a triumph or a disaster. A problem is a crisis, a setback, a policy in tatters, a criticism, a savage attack. And then in turn, the NGOs and the pundits know that unless they're prepared to go over the top, they shouldn't go out at all. Talk to any public service leader, especially, for example, in the NHS or the field of law and order, and they will tell you not that they mind the criticism, but they become totally demoralized by the completely unbalanced nature of it. Now, is this becoming worse? Again, I would say yes. In my 10 years, I've noticed all these elements evolve with ever greater momentum. Now, it used to be thought, and I include myself in this, that help was on the horizon. New forms of communication would provide new outlets to bypass the increasingly shrill tenor of the traditional media. In fact, the new forms could be even more pernicious, less balanced, more intent on the latest conspiracy theory multiplied by 5. But here is also the opportunity. At present, we are all being dragged down by the way media and public life interact. Trust in journalists is not much above that in politicians. Yet there is a market in providing serious, balanced news. There is a desire for impartiality. The way that people get their news may be changing, but the thirst for news being real news is not. The media, of course, understandably in a way, will fear any retreat from impact will mean diminishing sales. But the opposite can be the case. They need to reassert their own selling point in this new communication age, the distinction between news and comment. And incidentally, there is inevitably change on its way. The regulatory framework at some point will need revision. The PCC is for traditional newspaper publishing. Ofcom regulate broadcasting, except for the BBC, which has largely its own system of regulation. But under the new European regulations, all television streamed over the internet may be covered by Ofcom. And as the technology blurs the distinction between papers and television, it becomes increasingly irrational to have different systems of accountability based on technology that can no longer be differentiated in the old way. How this is done is an open question. And of course, the distinction between balance required of broadcasters but not of papers remains valid. But at some point, the system is going to change, and the importance of accuracy will not diminish whilst the freedom to comment remains. It's sometimes said that the media is accountable daily through the choice of readers and viewers. And of course that's true up to a point. But the reality is that the viewers or readers have no objective yardstick to measure what they're being told. In every other walk of life in our society that exercises power, there are external forms of accountability, not least of course through the media itself. So it is true politicians are accountable through the ballot box every few years, but they are also profoundly accountable daily, rightly, through the media, which is why a free press is so important. I'm not in a position to determine this one way or another, but a way needs to be found. I do believe this relationship between public life and the media is now damaged in a manner that requires repair. The damage saps the country's confidence and self-belief. It undermines its assessment of itself, its institutions, and above all, it reduces our capacity to take the right decisions in the right spirit for our future. So, those are my thoughts. I've made this speech after much hesitation. I know it will be rubbished in certain quarters. But I also know this is needed to be said, and so I've said it. Thank you.